Good evening, Sustainers. I'm Lisa Broad, OKCMOA's Head of Film Programming and co-curator of the new multimedia exhibition, Kiarostami Beyond the Frame. It's my very great pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event, and it's an honor to thank our generous exhibition sponsors, Leslie and Clifford Hudson, the Farazana family, Oklahoma Humanities, Jeanette and Rand Elliott, Alfred Hall Monahan Morris, Julia Carrington Hall, Philip and Heather Busey, Karen R. Delaney, Jean Rainbolt, Janice Films, and MK2. A retrospective of Kiarostami's short and feature films will be presented each week here in the Noble Theater in honor of the film program's great patron, Jeannie Hoffman-Smith, beginning this Saturday with a special screening of Certified Copy introduced by film scholar Godfrey Cheshire, and continuing each Thursday evening throughout the run of the exhibition. We'll begin tonight's program with a screening of Abbas Kiarostami's 1978 short film, Solution. It will be followed by a panel discussion with the artist's son, Ahmad Kiarostami, filmmaker Ramin Bahrani, and OKCMOA's president and CEO, Dr. Michael J. Anderson. I'll conclude my remarks with a brief introduction to the film that we're about to see. Solution was produced for Iran's government-run Institute for the Intellectual Development of Children and Young Adults, popularly known as Kanun. Abbas Kiarostami founded the Institute's film program in 1969 and directed his first short film, The Bread and Alley, which you'll see on the landing near the entrance to the exhibition in 1970. Made during the revolution, Solution was filmed in the mountains north of Tehran, and this landscape is both a source for the film's visual beauty and a starting point for its minimalist narrative, which centers on a man who is searching for a way to get a tire from a shop at the top of a mountain to his car below. Solution's adult protagonist marks it as unique among Kiarostami's educational films for Kanun, which typically featured children in lead roles, but it does fulfill a pedagogical mission in illustrating the virtues of perseverance and creative problem solving. It also conveys an infectious, childlike joy in motion and in the moving image, which can be felt throughout Kiarostami's work in film and video and throughout the exhibition Beyond the Frame. One thing that as I've been working on this exhibition, have been particularly struck by in Kiarostami's art is his keen attention to the material qualities of all the media in which he's worked, and his interest in testing and exploring the limits of those media. That's something that he shares with great filmmakers like Roberto Rossellini, Andrei Tarkovsky, and Jean-Luc Godard, who regarded Kiarostami's films as the pinnacle of the art form. The cinematic medium brought still photography to life by endowing images with duration and by capturing the movement of the subject before the lens, leading early film theorists to say that representing movement in time is both the essence of cinema and its highest calling. In Solution, movement is both the medium and the message, the form and the content. In Kiarostami's hands, an 11-minute film about a man and a tire traveling down a mountain becomes an occasion for wonder and for reflection. And he shows us what cinema is, what it can do, and what it can be.
Well, thank you all for coming out again. Thank you, Lisa, for the introduction. And let's just start by having our two visitors just briefly introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Ahmad Kiarostami. Abbas Kiarostami was my father. And that's why I'm here, and I'm very happy. I'm very happy with this exhibition. I'm very glad that Michael made this great exhibit and retrospective to my father, not only films, but also his artwork, which I hope you enjoy.
My name is Ramin Bahrani. I'm a filmmaker and friend of Ahmad's, and knew his father as well, and was one of the filmmakers I admired most in my life. And I'm honored and appreciate that you asked me to be here.
Well, thank you both again for coming. And I just want to start by asking you about a different medium than we've saw on the screen here, different than film or even the photography you've seen in the exhibition. But if you've been to the exhibition, you know that there's also poetry included in the exhibition. In Kiarostami's films, so there's written poetry, which Ahmad's father produced, which is published in more than 10 languages. That's included in the exhibition. But poetry is a much, I would say, bigger and more important medium just to discuss in terms of Persian culture in general. So I just want to begin by discussing the importance of poetry maybe to his work within Persian culture, and then the respects in which poetry kind of figures in his films as well.
Yeah, if it's possible, is the microphone okay in the back? Ahmad and I just wanted to very quickly acknowledge that there are massive protests happening right now in Iran. Nearly a month ago, a young woman was killed for wearing her veil not appropriately enough. And this plus so many other reasons, massive economic distress, has sparked a wave of protests led by mainly young women, but also men and older men and women as well. Many of these young women are being killed in the streets. We just wanted to acknowledge that and hope that if you don't know a lot about it, you might go home and try to read and know what it's about. And
yeah, it is a little difficult to start anything related to Iran in any form and not mentioning that. I just want to invite you to take a look online about what's happening. The question is what we can do from here, which is very little, but the first thing that we can do is to educate ourselves about what's happening, because the US's foreign policy has a big effect everywhere in the world, including Iran. And Iran has a big effect here because of the oil. And the second thing is you can talk to your representatives and ask them to do whatever you believe is right. I don't want to say what is right, what is wrong, but get involved. That's the extent of it, and we can go back to your question.
I think, of course, we very much want to talk about poetry, but I have to react to the film we just saw because I remember seeing this film maybe, 15, 20 years ago, I think on YouTube. And I was so thrilled at the reaction because people were gasping that this tire might fall off the mountain. And of course, there was also laughter. And I think there's so much in this early short film that embodies a lot of his work. I mean, in looking at it again fresh now, I mean, you care so much about a man that you can't even see his eyes. I think by choice, he's just man, just person. And that you cared so much about what happened, that there's a wit in most all of his films has a wry humor, a very kind of dry, wry humor that was wonderful to hear people laughing, and a lot of his use of what's not, even in the beyond the frame, how long it takes for us to even know that he's across the street from a tire shop or a mechanic shop. These are things that continue in his work. I mean, very easily I could imagine in his later films you would never see the mechanic shop, you would only hear the sounds of it. So there's so many of his techniques that you see them brewing here.
The wind will carry us. There's a guy, a reporter with a crew. You never see the crew. You only hear them. There's a funny story because my father used to wake up very early in the morning, and apparently the crew that was there with him to shoot the film, they were lazy. They would get up late, and he got upset. And during the shooting of the film, he decided that he's going to cut them from the movie. So he cut the whole crew. You don't see them. You just hear about them.
Yeah, I think there are 11 characters in The Wind Will Carry Us that you never see on the screen. And well, if we do want to talk about poetry,
yes,
that's a great place to start, actually.
Yes. People mostly know my father as a filmmaker, but he always said that I'm not a filmmaker. I'm an artist, and I have different mediums to express myself, and film is just one of them, and it's the one that got the most attention. But he, in his films and then other things, it's been told that he was the poet of cinema, like the same way that they call Kurosawa the emperor of cinema. He's been called the poet of cinema, and I think a big part of it, and he's always said it, I don't think, I'm sure that a big part of it is coming from the Persian culture. and poetry being part of it. When you talk about cinema, we have two types of cinema. One is the Hollywood cinema, the entertainment, which is great. I'm not against it at all, but it's not very artistic. It tells you everything. So you sit there, my father used to say, it takes you hostage. You sit there, you can't breathe, you watch everything, but then you walk out, you go have a burger and you forget about the film. And then there's art film that gets you involved. Maybe nothing happens much, but a few days later, you remember something about the film and you get engaged in the story. He said a good art, any form of art, including cinema, is like poetry, that half of it happens on screen and half of it happens in your mind. He said when you look at his library, he said, I have fiction books, storybooks, that if you look at those books, you may think that I've never read them because I read them once and then I put it back. But with my poetry books, we look at them, they're destroyed because I take them out, I read them and I put it back and I read them. It sits there beside my bed. And it gets you involved. So I want to say that his cinema is that way, that half of it happens on screen, half of it happens in your mind. If you see his later films, most of them, they have an open ending. Like you see the same film, you come out, you have different interpretations of it. And I think that is coming from Persian poetry and the culture. And he got the essence of it and used it in his art. Not just here, but also in his photos, in his video installation and other things.
Yeah, and I know there's some Iranians here, but also many who are not Iranian. And poetry in Iran is just a major part of the culture. You cannot open a magazine or a newspaper without a section devoted to poetry. You could not be on television and not recite a poem. I was raised here, but Ahmad, growing up in Iran, would have been memorizing poems from a very early age. Even my grandmother in Iran, who was living in a small village, was illiterate, but could recite poetry. So it's a foundational component of the society. And part of the thing about poetry and different from just straight up fictional storytelling is that there's a bit of a puzzle in a poem which is very hard to put together. And as Ahmad was saying, how you put it together and how you interpret it is up to you. So hopefully you're going to start engaging in Kiarostami's cinema and his art, but it's certainly in his cinema, if you approach it expecting all the answers and for him to tell you every single thing, you will probably hit a wall. It's better to just let it be what it is and know that going in, and I think you're going to come out with a lot of rewards.
A question that I guess we had throughout Kiarostami's whole film career, beginning with his first short film, Bread and Alley, and continuing into his features, he got these wonderful performances from child actors, and in Bread and Alley, there's even a dog. So he worked, with children throughout his career, and I was wondering if you wanted to.
I think acted very well. The last scene, the last shot, Tyre knew where to stop exactly.
We were just wondering if you wanted to talk about his work with child actors in particular, and with and just a performance in general.
Until the very end, he always worked with non-actors, normal people that had no background in acting. Toward the end, he used some professional actors, including Juliette Binoche. But mostly, throughout his films, you only have non-actors. And the way they act is just amazing. But in this scene, you see the kid is not acting. He's really crying. And but at the same time, he says exactly what he's supposed to say. What he did here was he took a Polaroid picture from the kid, and he said, "This is so beautiful. This is so nice. You look so good here." But his assistant said, "Q Mars, he shouldn't see this. Well, I'm not supposed to give this to you. You shouldn't have it. If he sees it, he'll get very upset. So make sure that Q Mars wouldn't see this." And so I'm telling you, QMAS shouldn't see it. Again, I'm telling you, QMAS shouldn't see it. I'm telling you 3 times. I told you 3 times he shouldn't see it. And said, but this is a very beautiful picture, you have to have it. And then puts it there. 2 minutes later, QMAS walks in and opens the book and said, where did you get this? And you don't see this in the film. It destroys the photo. And the kid gets really upset that he's lost his picture and starts crying because of that. So instead of saying that, let's pretend that this happened and you should pretend to cry, he recreated that with the kid. And this, he always said, it comes from working with children. And his first films for the first 15 years, he made films for children, with children. And he said, you cannot ask a child to act. They don't understand that. You have to create an environment that they do things that you want to do. But he also said that I try to find the closest character to the one that I have in mind. But then after I find that, I change my character based on that person. So in that way, the person doesn't need to act. They can be themselves. So that's how he did. I wanted to use the word manipulate, but Ramin said don't use that word, it's too negative. But that's what he did. He basically manipulated people in a good way, if there's such a thing. Ramin, I want to say something that in 2005, I think, we were in Morocco, and my father had a workshop there for 10 days. And the very first day, he decided that translator was not good. And it was funny because he would go to Japan. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little off track, but we would go to Japan and he had a translator there. And then after 5 minutes, he would fire the translator. Like he wasn't good. Like, how do you know? You don't speak Japanese. How do you know it was good or not? He said, when I say something for 5 minutes and he or she translates in 2 minutes, I know it's not good. Or tries in 8 minutes, I know it's not good. And then when I say something, the punchline is towards the end and people laugh at the end. And when he says it, people laugh at the beginning. I know he's not a good translator. So Ramin started helping my father and translated the whole workshop. So Ramin spent the whole workshop with my father. I think that's the closest that you got him. So you know a lot of these things from that workshop. If you want to say something.
Yeah, I mean, some of these things I knew just from reading his interviews, but these kind of techniques of working with non-actors and how to cast them, I used all this because my first 3 films that I made were comprised of mainly non-professional actors, including one of the movies, Chomp Chomp, is with 2 children, and all these kind of techniques we used there. I mean, this film, Where's the Friend's House, the reason I had to get up and sit there is this is one of my favorite films and films that impacted me the most, and this is a favorite film of many of the great directors. I mean, for Werner Herzog, this is one of the greatest films ever made, and you mentioned Jean-Luc Godard, who passed away recently. Many of you may know Godard. He made Breathless and was one of the key figures in cinema from the French New Wave. Even he said cinema begins with D.W. Griffith and ended with Kiarostami, meaning he did not see anywhere else cinema could go after that.
And Kurosawa said, when Ozu died, I thought cinema ended, but then I saw Kiarostami, which was this film.
When Satyajit Ray died.
Oh, Satyajit
The great
Ray,
Indian
right.
director, yeah. He also Kurosawa loved Kiarostami.
So this would come to be the first movie of a trilogy, and we'll be showing all of these films throughout our retrospective. So please do look on our website. Make sure you see when these are playing, because this is certainly a must-see. But this is the first film of what came to be known as the Coker trilogy. So I just want to ask if you could provide a little bit of kind of context and how these films fit together, because they do seem to be really a centerpiece of your father's career.
So my father made films for 15, 16 years in Iran, short films, mostly short films, and some films that he said they're too short to be long and too long to be short, 3 of those. But then he made this film, and this one became very famous everywhere and won many prizes in different festivals across the world. And with this film, he became an internationally known name. Where he shot the film few years later, there was an earthquake. And he went to find these two kids that in films you see they're friends, but they're actual brothers. And they don't look alike, but they're brothers. So he went to find them. And the earthquake happened on the night of his 50th birthday. And my he said that back then he was very depressed. Not depressed, but he was very sad, very down. And then that night, that exact night, the earthquake happened, which was a huge earthquake, a big part of the whole village in the north part of Iran was destroyed, where these kids were from. So he drove there the next day with my younger brother, who was about 10 years old back then. He drove there. And then later on, he made another film about his trip. He said he went there looking because of death, but he found life. And you have to see it to see what happens. But then in the film, something happens. There's one of the characters of the film gets married the day after the earthquake. But then that was one of his, okay, I know the word, it's not manipulation, it's bamboozle, because this is the word that Godfrey used, that my father used, liked this, play with everybody, not just his non-actors, but also with the audience. So one of the most touching stories in that film, I believe, is this guy who gets married and how he gets married. He tells a story, but then in his next film, he tells you that he completely lied about that. And the guy was actually in love with the girl who played in the film, but the girl wouldn't answer him because he was illiterate. The girl was literate. So his next film was about that. That maybe it's a good time to show that little clip.
Dudley, could you show the clip from Through the Olive Trees?
So in the film, the girl rejects this guy. And then this is the guy, when you see this clip, that has a theory. And I'm going to talk about that later.
This is the third film in the trilogy. Yeah.
This is the third film.
Yeah, and the third film is about the making of the second film, for them to know.
So,
yes,
yep, so
because it becomes a meta quality in some of his films. So this, Through the Olive Trees or Under the Olive Trees, depending on how you translate it, is the third in the trilogy, which is about the making of the second film, which was about a recreation in a way of your father's experience with your brother going there to this earthquake that hit.
A lot of people died. And he had an idea for the fourth film, but then said it's just enough. Let's not do it anymore. So if you spoke Persian, you could see that the way he says these things is so natural. Again, he's not acting. And what happened here was, a week before shooting this scene, my father goes on a walk with this guy, Hossein, and says, I have an idea. Don't you think that poor people should marry rich people, literate people should marry rich people? So he says this idea, and I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then they come back. That night, he talks to the cameraman and says, oh, Hossein has an amazing idea. He was telling me something. I said, like, what did I tell you? He said, what you told me. Tell him. So why did I tell you? Say what you were saying about literates marrying illiterates. I didn't say it. You said it. It doesn't matter. Just say it. So Hossein says it. And then the next morning, said, Mr. Farid, Hossein was telling me something very interesting last night. Just listen to his idea. So this time Hossein knows what my father is talking about. So he repeats what he said. My father keeps doing it for the next week. And then after a week, this is Hossein saying it. He hasn't memorized the dialogue, repeating in front of camera. This becomes his idea. So when they shoot this in front of camera, he really tells you this from his own heart, and this is his idea. So that's how he played or manipulated people to get what he wanted.
This was his first film I saw on a big screen at the New York Film Festival when it premiered there, I don't know when, 1996, I think it was, 97. I was a student, as an undergraduate student at Columbia University, and I went to see the film. And there's this man, Hossein, wants to marry this woman in the movie. And there's a very important scene in the film where they're having a conversation and they're very far away from the camera. I mean, they're in a field, I don't know, way past this building and the 4 streets over there. And the answer to what they're saying is very important, but you cannot hear what they're saying because the camera is very far away. And I'll never forget, after the screening, there was a Q&A. Your dad was there with Richard Pena, who was at that time my professor at Columbia, but also the head of the New York Film Festival. And a woman stood up, an older New York woman. Old New York women have a lot of attitude if you've not been to New York. And she stood up and said, "What the hell did they say in that scene? I sat through this whole movie. What did they say?" And your dad looked at her and said, "I don't know, the camera was too far away for me to hear." Now you're laughing, but that woman didn't laugh. She got very angry and left. And then I remember I snuck into the back of to the green room because I wanted to meet your dad. He was like my hero. And I snuck into the back and I was talking to him. I couldn't believe oh my God, I'm talking to one of my heroes. And I even said, "How could I be in touch with you? Like, well, what am I going to tell him? I'm a college student." He said, "Oh, take my fax number." Fax. I didn't have a pen. My pen didn't work. And then Richard Pena came as his student. He saw me and said, "You cannot be here," and he kicked me out. And that was the first time I met your dad, was at that screening, yeah.
On with the plan.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I just learned that in the university here, local university, you have a Persian studies, which I was not expecting that in Oklahoma. I don't know like how many Iranians you have here to have a Persian studies, which was surprising. But I just remember that there's a documentary about an Italian girl. It's called Khorshid Khanum. She was walking very depressed. She just walked to a theater to watch a film. She didn't know what the film is. She just wanted to spend 2 hours in cinema. And it was this film. And she fell in love with Iran, and he learned Persian and moved to Iran. So maybe if you show this film more, you have more students.
I can't encourage you enough to see this trilogy. It's just something very special and very different than anything you've seen. Just stay with it. Don't, as we said earlier, if you're not familiar with his films, don't expect a fast-paced movie, but just stay with it, and it will wash over you and stay with you for a long time.
And my father always said that even if you take a nap in the middle of his film, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Seriously, he said many times.
Yeah.
But don't look for a fast-paced, as Ramin said, film, like a Hollywood-style films. And it's an open-ended, you're going to come out with your own interpretation, which I hope you're going to like.
I have a very quick anecdote, and then maybe we'll turn it over to the audience for questions. The first time I saw one of your father's films, it was Taste of Cherry. I found the video cassette. I had never seen one of his movies before. I had read an interview where he said his favorite movies were movies he had fallen asleep during. I tried to watch it at 11 o'clock on Christmas night because I got it for Christmas, and I fell asleep. And I woke up the next day and watched it, and it was instantly one of my favorite movies of all time. So I felt like it was okay. So if you fall asleep the first time you see a Kiarostami movie, you're in good company, and just watch it again, and you'll love them. They'll become your favorites.
Let me just complete what he said.
Yeah.
He said it's okay if you fall asleep. He was talking about films. He said, I like films that make me comfortable enough to take a nap. But there was one condition. He said, if the film stays with you after you leave the theater, not just falling asleep.
And I had to watch it. I honestly had to watch it again the next day because it did stay with me. There was something about it. I had never seen anything like it at that point.
I think that's part of what he talks about a lot, and what you see in the movies is by not showing everything, by not answering everything, he's encouraging you to fill in those blanks on your own. So when you don't see but you hear, you're daydreaming what's going on outside the frame. You're wondering, and when you don't know all the answers, you walk out dreaming and daydreaming about them. And even when you go to dinner with the person you saw the movie with, you can be even arguing about it. I think this happened, right? And you start to put your own life and your own emotions into the art, into what you're seeing, and you become a participant in the picture.
Before we open up to the audience, because there was a clip that Ramin liked very much and he wanted to show. This is from the first film of this trilogy. There's a grandfather talking to the grandchild. And again, another thing, when they went to shoot this film in that little village, he goes to this old man and says, oh, you look exactly like my father. You're going to meet him. he's going to come here for the film.
Your dad said that.
But my dad tells this old man, his dad passed away before I was born. So he was lying. Yeah, exactly. I said, you look exactly like my father, and he's going to come here, you're going to meet him, but you look just like him. And he started telling stories about his father to this old man. But then a few weeks later, he said, my father got sick and he can't come. Maybe you can act on his behalf. And that's how he gets him to play in the film and tells the stories that he had told him about his father.
I know he often talked about simple storytelling, and his stories are so specific to his culture and to Iran and to what he saw, but they're so universal. I mean, I was watching it just now, and I was thinking about, I read a book the last couple of weeks called A Childhood by Harry Crews. Has anyone read it? And Harry Crews he wrote a lot of books, but he grew up very poor in Georgia. And so it sounded just like this. And I'm in my room, I'm editing this documentary I told you about, which is about a short documentary about the lack of health care in the rural South. And I talked to this funeral home director who also some of what he said sounded just like this. And it reminded me about how he used to talk about simple, universal stories.
Yeah, somebody in Iran told me your father X-rayed people and showed that image. Because that's why it's universal. Because we all look the same, but he had the ability to go through the human emotions and thoughts and show it to everybody. So even though it's very cultural, it goes beyond culture and a local place.
We can open it up to the audience for a few questions if anybody has anything they'd like to ask or say.
I'm curious, did you ever act in any of his films as a child?
In 2 films, short films, and in one of them, I'm just sitting in the back doing nothing, and the other one's like 5 seconds, I'm buttoning up my overcoat, and that's it.
There's a short film, So Can I, that we're showing as part of our first short film program. And now that you've seen and met Ahmed, when you see him in the film, 1975, you will know that it's Ahmed. It's really great to see.
He didn't want me to be in his films, and he said, and I as a kid I would have loved to be in his films, and I always said, but in that film specifically, the name of the film is So Can I, and it's about a kid that does whatever different animals do, and I was saying that I can do it too, so can I. So why don't you let me do it? And then he said, okay. Once he finally said, okay, let's go do it, and we're gonna film you. And then later on, he said the camera was broken. Even at that age, I knew he was lying. So there's a pattern of lying there.
Did he always choose to use very specific film shots as opposed to cinema verite, something like that, to express the character of the people in different ways?
Yeah, I mean, even in the first film we saw, the short film, there's certain kind of handheld wider lens shots that those go away as he kept developing as a filmmaker. He wasn't really a handheld kind of filmmaker like that. The shots are very composed. I think one of the things when you're looking at the films is you will think everything is just happening, but the shots and the choreography is all very planned. I'll never forget so many different moments with your dad, but he saw my first film, Man Push Cart, and we talked about it. And then my next film, he was there at the premiere in Cannes, and he sat right behind me, which was for me very nerve-wracking because I thought, my God, what if he doesn't like it? And he loved the film. Then we went for a walk, and he told me how much he liked it, which we don't need to get into. But then he said, but there's 2 things I would change. I said, oh my God. I mean, it's too late now. I've already finished the film. It just premiered. He said, in this moment, the movie was like 85 minutes. He said, in this specific moment, you should have cut the first 13 frames And then in this other moment, it would have been better if you had started the shot a little bit later when the actor was already in the frame. I said, maybe what an eye, come on, give me a break. I went back and I looked at it and he was right on both of them. And I was like, my God. And at that time, I didn't quite know yet how meticulously planned all these accidents were. I know there's room for accident, and I came to understand that even in my own work. You plan and you plan and you plan, and then you got to be loose and let things happen. But his attention to detail at that moment, I didn't really know until then, the attention to detail.
Film, a certified copy that Godfrey's going to talk about it on Saturday. There's a making of certified copy. Do you have that as well? No, okay. So when you see that, you see a lot of it, that how he plans every little thing. Actually, may I ask, this video clip that you just showed, can you show the beginning of it one more time and pause the first scene when the kid is running down?
Running down the hill.
So as Ramin said, when you look at his film, everything is so natural. Bahman, you may not know this, but Fahmar, another great director in Iran, he said he caused the biggest damage to Iranian cinema, my father. He said Abbas caused the biggest damage to Iranian cinema because everything looks so simple that all these new directors, they think they can take a camera and shoot something very simple, and it's not like that.
Oh, I've seen it I teach, in addition to being a filmmaker, I teach in the graduate program at Columbia University, and every year there's at least 2 or 3 students from all over the world who worship your father, and when they try to make the simple films, you fall asleep and don't wake up.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. It's really hard to do.
Yeah. So this is a hill that the kid goes to the village next to this village to find his friend.
This is a key image in the film. It's such a famous location that he found that even tourists from as far away as Japan come to see this natural hill.
Yes. And this specific scene became very famous in cinema in general, this zigzag road. This was just a very simple hill with very small tree at the top and no pathway. He got branches from other trees and made that tree look big. And then he, on a Friday, which is the weekend in Iran, he brought a class of kids and made them walk up and down that hill. And he created that path, that zigzag path. Everything in his films, it's well thought. He made things that you don't even see. In the Wind Will Carry Us, there is a woman, a lady, a coffee shop owner. I went there when he was shooting that film. I went there. He was painting something on the wall that you don't even see. I was like, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, this coffee shop belongs to a woman. It should be more tasteful." So he was drawing little things on the wall that looks. But again, when you watch the film, you don't even see that, but the feeling is there. So again, everything was, as Ramin said, was very well thought out and put there for a reason.
Thank you for the plug for the Persian language program at OU. That's really nice. I just wanted to tell you that once the students get to intermediate advanced level, I assigned the movie 10 of your father, which is a lot of dialogue. You know, unlike some of his movies where there is not much dialogue. Movie 10, of course, 10 sections, and this one woman driving through streets of Tehran. So they not only see the streets of Tehran, but they also engage in this conversation between the woman and different characters. Can you say something about that movie? Something like any anecdotes or any memories from that movie?
Yes. Actually, that's the only film of my father besides Shirin that you have a woman as the main character. And in some of his films, you don't have any woman, or they have very small role in the film, and there was a reason. He was very committed to showing a real image of whatever he was doing. And in Iran, the regime has imposed a veil and hijab. Women, so they have to wear hijab when they go outside. But obviously they don't wear hijab when they're inside with their children and husband. And he said, like, I cannot make a film and show a woman wearing hijab in her own home. I just can't do it. And because of that, I can't do it. So for that film, he had an idea. The original idea was that was a psychologist who advised one of her clients to get a divorce. And after that, she sued her and she lost her license. But she kept seeing her patients inside her car. So that was the original plot, but then it changed into what you see in the film, which was, and you have that in his films, as in that film, in Close Up, that he never liked talking about politics and the situation directly, but you have it everywhere in the background. And in that film, he talks about the divorce, about the economy, about all those things that was going on in Iran back then.
Also, it features a car, and cars were very important to him, I think, as an artist, as a thinker, as a person, and they played a huge role in his movies. Many of his movies take place in cars. Taste of Cherry, that Mike mentioned earlier, almost the entire movie's in a moving car.
You know, he always hated having a big crew. Sometimes when he shot a film, like the whole crew were like less than 10 people. And then he was commissioned to go and make a film about AIDS in Africa by the UN. And he went there with his friend, Samadian. This is 2000, digital cameras were new. So they took 2 digital cameras to go there and shoot as notes. And then when he came back, he said, the quality is not good, but this is so real, I'm not gonna go there and shoot again with a real camera. We're gonna use this. And he used the same footage that he had for his film, which is called ABC Africa. But then this is when he was introduced to digital cameras, digital cinema. And in that film, he used digital camera, he put it on the dash. And I believe it's one of the very first films that was made totally using digital cameras.
So I think we have to stop there, but before we do, I just want to ask either Ahmed or Ramin if you want to say anything else, maybe about the exhibition. We've talked a lot about the cinema, but maybe is there anything that you want to add as we close about the exhibition?
So we have 2 series in this exhibition and a lot of smaller things, but one is called Doors Without Keys. My father, he died in 2016. In November 2015, he showed the full series at Aga Khan Museum in Toronto, which has about 50 doors. Here we have 20 of them. So this is a subset of that. That's the only place that we showed them. And then the other exhibition, OKCMOA, or Look at Me, that one is, he never showed it anywhere. After he died, we showed some of them at an exhibition in collaboration with the Louvre, because you'll see it, most of those pictures, they're taken at the Louvre Museum. So in collaboration with that museum, we showed some of them in Iran. But we cannot show all of them. This is the first time we're showing them. And that whole manipulation and everything I talked about, you can see in those pictures as well. You have to spend a little time and pay attention to details to find those manipulations, both indoors and the other one. But if you get the puzzle, the puzzle, the logic behind the puzzle, I hope you're gonna enjoy it.
Let's give Ahmed and Ramin a round of applause. Thank them for coming in. And the galleries will remain open until 8 tonight if you haven't seen the exhibition.
I'm sorry,
yet.
Michael. I just want to thank you for making this happen. We had a similar exhibition at Centre Pompidou in Paris last year, not as big as this one, which is a very big museum in Paris, very famous, important museum. I'm much more excited about this museum because I was telling Michael that in France, there are a group of people who are familiar with his work. There's nothing new for them, and there are people who are not interested. So it's not their kind of thing. So there was not much happening there, I would say. Like we had a lot of viewers coming there and they loved the exhibition, but that audience already knew it. I'm very excited about showing this in Oklahoma for 6 months because there's an opportunity to reach out to a new audience and to show an image of Iran that they probably don't see anywhere else because it's not in the media. And that's the only thing that we have. And I'm very happy and I'm grateful to you, Michael, for making this happen.